Hello, everyone. So this is the first video lecture of the last chapter in the semester in the book, or the last section. This section, this section of this module is adolescence. I would say over the whole semester or of this course, this is my favorite topic. I really like the chat topic of adolescence, which is the period between puberty and adulthood and young adulthood. So these are my two favorites. I don't necessarily know why. So we're going to define adolescence as the period between puberty and young adulthood. Now the question is, or both of those things are, puberty has a specific definition, has a like a physiologically defined definition, but young adulthood does not. Puberty is defined as the onset of sexual physical development. So typically it's about 10 for girls, about 12 for boys. You probably all know or are aware that girls develop faster than boys. There is a historical trend toward puberty, the onset of, like we're talking about, a girl's first menstrual cycle, development of her breasts, the boy's Adam's apples, his voice, right? We're talking about that kind of sexual development. But there's a historical trend for puberty to onset sooner. And there's a whole variety of reasons or explanations. One, I think, is probably obvious that we have better nutrition, we have more food available. Puberty in girls is influenced by the proportion of body fat. So, with the evolution and more calorie-rich foods available in a culture, the earlier the onset of a menstrual cycle. So, there's a correlation with what young people eat. There's also a relationship with the absence of a father, and this may seem kind of like a corny thing, but this is related to the hormonal influence of the male sexual hormone of testosterone and the female hormonal influence of estrogen and progesterone. If you have ever lived in a group of girls, you'll notice how girls' menstrual cycles sync up, and this has to do with the hormones. And it's believed, or my understanding is, that the hormonal signals are translated through odor, and they're all at a very subconscious influence. So when you don't have testosterone in a home, when you only have female influence, that triggers other female hormones in girls. Girls get to be in sync. That would actually be in another chapter, but the syncing up is determined by the socially dominant female. So I'll say when my daughter was still living at home, she was the socially dominant female, so my cycles synced up with her. And so that's what I mean by socially dominant. So obesity is another sort of correlation, and obesity has to do with body fat, which influences the release of other hormones, which then causes the cycles, and endocrine disruption. Endocrine is a fancy word for hormones. So you'll notice these are all kind of related. You've got endocrine disruption has to do with chemicals and toxins, environmental, and some that we digest, which cause our hormones to act differently or to be released differently. But there are one theory that I think does make sense is that the more the more meat animal products that we consume. So cows, for instance, specifically, are fed growth hormones to cause them to get bigger so that we can get more meat. Female cows are given hormones so that they produce milk. These hormones, these growth hormones, these lactating hormones come out in the food, come out in the milk, come out in the cheese. We ingest those things, and this potentially causes our own hormones to become out of sync. So that's what we mean by hormone disruption. So the point is that there's a lot of influence of hormones and some of the social factors that contribute to changes in hormones. The next question on this slide is that it ends at adulthood. So I think there'll be a discussion. I'll put a discussion in the module. What does that mean? When do you become an adult? So the idea that adolescence goes from when our bodies begin to sexualize until we reach adulthood, because then we're in the next stage of life, which if you're in my human growth class, we'll move on to young adulthood. But when does that happen? When are you no longer an adolescent? So typically, I don't think I actually have it anywhere in this chapter. Typically, we talk about adolescence as being somewhere between maybe 10 and 11 and 20. It's a really broad range. And why 20? Because I don't know. I don't. Yes, that I don't mean I don't know, but why 20? But we're really living in a time when adulthood is in flux. Once upon a time, we might have said 18 was adulthood, but a lot of 18-year-olds are still financially dependent on their parents. They may still live at home. So is it determined by when you don't live at home? Is it determined by a financial independence? What do you mean? Do you mean 100% financially independent? Do you mean when your parents aren't paying for your cell phone or aren't paying for your car insurance? Is it when you're no longer in school? Well, does that mean if I drop out of 16 that I'm now in school? Does it mean when my parents are no longer legally obligated to take care of me? Or maybe adulthood is determined by when I can vote. I can vote at 18, but I can't buy cigarettes. Well, maybe I can't. I don't forget. I can't buy alcohol until I'm 21. Most states I can't rent a car until I'm 25. So when do I become an adult? The thing, and that's what I'll ask you. You tell me, how do you define adulthood? But generally, we're going to talk about adolescence as about 11 to about 20. This, though, is also a really great, fun time to study, because adolescence is also considered, and this isn't in your textbook, it's in another textbook, the time of opportunities and risk. So because most adolescents are not expected to be financially independent, because most adolescents still are being supported by their adults, by their guardians, because most of the time they don't have financial expectations, they don't have obligations to children. This is a time where they can try things, and they can try them safely. So it is a time when young people are supposed to be taking opportunities, they're supposed to be doing new things, and they're supposed to be exploring who they are, taking these risks in a safe and protected way. What's also worth knowing, or important that we understand and we talk about, is that this is a time of a lot is going on in our bodies. We've got a lot of hormonal changes that are driving our behaviors. We would be remiss not to acknowledge that hormones affect the way we feel, and the way we feel affects how we act. This is a time, remember I've said in previous chapters, the brain is developing from the back to the front. The back is where we have balance. The middle is where we've got a lot of emotions are going on in here. And the front is where we control our behavior. So down here under brain growth, the limbic system is very responsive to, I apologize for that interruption. What I was saying is, so the brain is going through some rapid growth, right? We're going from the back to the front. The limbic system is doing some rapid development. We've got some hormones that are influencing the emotional center. So young people are exploring. We've got the prefrontal cortex. This is the last part to develop. So you've got the emotion, the novelty seeking, but we don't yet have the control over our emotional center. And at the same time, we have an abundance of dopamine and oxytocin. These are two of the best hormones, neurotransmitters. Dopamine is all about, I like to say dopamine is dope. It's all about reward and feeling good. And oxytocin, which is considered the love hormone or the trust hormone. So you've got this emotional reward for trying new things, and you've got a bond with our peers. So we're going through adolescence, and we're shifting away from our parents being our primary relationships, attachments, to our friends being our primary attachment. Their brains are doing the same thing. They're being rewarded by trying new things, by their oxytocin. Brains are developing. They may be enticing us or giving us opportunities. Remember, it's opportunities and risk. So our brains are receptive or sensitive to the damage of drugs. This is also the period where, if we are going to suffer from mental illness, these things start to show up towards the end of adolescence into the first part of young adulthood, is when we begin to see the onset of mental illness. The statistics are something like, if you get to 25, you've not had a depressive episode, you've not had an anxiety attack, you're probably good to go. But that's not a common thing. So I'm going to stop here, and when I come back in lecture 2, I want to talk more about what's happening in our bodies in the context of adolescent growth, and how the adolescent growth spurt informs the sexual development of our bodies. So stop right